What's going on, everyone? This is Shields. Welcome, welcome. This is going to be an interesting one. It's probably the first video that I've done that's more about current events. I plan not to do a lot of these just because current politics or specifically the influence on humanity, whether it be a domestic slash United States issue, which is where I'm from, or whether it be on a global scale, you really have to have years or even decades pass before you can see the pros and cons of events and whatnot. So, for context, this is going to be a video by Vox. Vox just released this today. I thought it was an important video to do just because not a lot of reactionary content needs to be specifically about hundreds or thousands of years ago. It also has to do with like things that are when history is happening right in front of us. Sometimes you need to react to that. So I'm going to lay out a couple ground rules to this particular video. One, this isn't a political propaganda video in any way. So this video is going to be more or less a reaction to how this video is going to be presented. More or less an understanding and a reactionary comparatively to maybe Trump's first term. I understand that, this election was split pretty much right down the middle, depending how you look at it. I think one, it's a topic that a lot of people stay away from just because of its polarizing, you know, side versus, Kamala Harris and the Democrats and Trump and the Republicans. It's a part of it. So we're not going to get too much into the intro. We're just going to get into the video. Like I said, I'm not trying to make anything political about this. Just going to see, the video itself. So the video itself is, of course, titled "How Trump's Second Term Will Be Different." So if you remember his first term, 2017 to 2020, there was a lot of things that were, considered net good for the country and a lot of things that were considered net bad with the country. We won't get too much into the details. I'll let some of the video do its telling. But yeah, let's jump into it. If you're new here, my name is Shields, and welcome to the We Project. We do a lot of reactions to content all across YouTube, specifically around things around humanity and history. So let's go.
Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
I want to thank the American people for the
And another pause. First time since Grover Cleveland we've seen this. Yeah.
extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
So I think we should start off by just saying what's happening, and then my big question is going to be, how should we be thinking about this?
We now know that Donald Trump is returning to the White House. American voters have seen what Trump had to offer, and at least a critical mass of them decided they want to do the same thing again.
I called up some colleagues at Vox to ask what we should be making of this moment, and I ended up spending a long time talking to Zach.
I'm Zach Beecham. I'm a senior correspondent at Vox.
Zach writes about reactionary politics, the right wing, basically. And the thing that he really wanted me to understand is that even though the outcome of this election is the same as the 2016 election, the Trump...
Different landscape, entirely different landscape. We'll pause right there. Trump's first term, he was pretty much getting into an economy that was on the up. It was a rising economy. So it's a different outlook than today, where inflation's a little bit more than, of course, where it was in 2016. You already have the hindsight of the coronavirus, as you did not in 2016. You don't have the Ukrainian Russo war happening. You don't have the Israeli-Palestinian war happening. Iran isn't as big of a threat as an adversary on the outside. North Korea is the interesting thing about North Korea is I think North Korea has been overshadowed by the other two fronts of things going on in the world, whether it be Ukraine or the Middle East. But North Korea is rising tensions severely with South Korea in that specific area over there. So it's actually very parallel to the Korean Peninsula and how that's adapted over the last 8 years. You know, besides that, technology has boomed in terms of AI and how, you know, a lot of things can start to, you know, integrate with things. So, in terms of overall, we have advanced in 8 years, but there's also areas where we have not advanced in terms of geopolitical areas. So, yeah, let's keep going.
Who is about to become president is different.
Donald Trump is much more organized. He knows what he's doing, has a series of distinct policy objectives that he's reiterated again and again. It will be, in a lot of ways, fundamentally different than what we all lived through 4 years ago.
8 years ago.
Lock up the Bidens. Lock up Hillary. Lock them up.
The first time Trump was president, he wanted to do all sorts of very controversial things, and a lot of times he didn't actually end up doing them. One big example is wanting his critics and political opponents.
By the way, such a great thing that he did not go after, because we do not want to become the society that incriminates the political parties that one side does not like, because once we start doing that, it's a slippery slope. So I am so glad he did not go after Hillary Clinton specifically.
To be prosecuted. He was constrained by other parts of the political system, the guardrails of democracy. I'm Andrew Prokop. I cover politics. The guardrails encompass first Congress and the courts, but also within the executive branch, you have Trump's own appointees for top positions who often last time around proved unwilling to carry out some of the things he wanted to do. Then you also have the permanent civil service, career employees that he can't fire at will. Well, first of all, the courts have grown more conservative and more Trump-friendly since he put 3 of his own appointees in the Supreme Court. Congressional Republicans have grown much more pro-Trump. Trump and the people around him want hardcore MAGA true believers staffing the government who will not have these pesky qualms about legality or ethics or things.
And that's one thing, because that's one thing that's important. In 2016, he didn't actually think he was going to win the presidency. So that was more or less a reactionary mindset on his behalf whenever he did win. So he kind of like fell into it. Versus now, he's a little bit more on his feet when it comes to what's going on and how he can adapt to the environment.
Things like that. And regarding the civil service, Trump wants to use an executive order to reclassify thousands of people with civil service protections against firing as political appointees who he can fire, to then put in a lot of MAGA loyalists in their place instead. He's had 4 years to basically stew over, you know, what he didn't get to do last time and what he would do differently if he was given another chance. And now he will seemingly get that chance.
We're going to have the largest deportation in the history of our country.
The mantra that Trump had on the border on 2016 was build the wall. That was his centerpiece of his immigration platform. That sort of changed over the course of his presidency, and increasingly he wanted to turn his attention not to the border, but to the interior of the US, the undocumented population here. I'm Nicole Norea, and I cover politics and immigration for Vox. Under Biden, there were record levels of people arriving on the border. We've seen those numbers come down significantly in 2024, but when Americans are polled, large portions of them say that they want mass deportations. They might be thinking about people being deported immediately after they arrive on the border, but that's not what Trump's contemplating. He's trying to go into communities across the US, and we're talking about people who have lived here, you know, for years and decades. That would sort of involve huge investments in law enforcement, and also the cooperation of local law enforcement agencies, which I'm not sure we would see necessarily in Democratic states, but let's say in states like Texas and Florida.
So I'm not going to comment too much on the immigration side of things, just because I'm not as knowledgeable on that front. I'm not sure too much on the amnesty laws. I'm not too sure on how we will qualify, you know, individuals that are technically on an illegal status, but they are contributing to society. They are, you know, they have families, they have, you know, they are servants to this country. I think there has to be a little bit more of grace with that. I don't know if it's black and white. I hope it's no one's going to take this black and white at all, because there should be grace in our immigration policies. There should be guardrails plus grace. That's my stance on it. We should keep people out that are, already having the criminality status from their own countries. We should make it difficult for those individuals to get into the country, especially related to drugs. So many people, unfortunately, they just die for fentanyl, and it's just not a good thing. It's not a good thing. So I think that trumps. Nope, sorry for the play on words. That trumps everything is the epidemic due to fentanyl, and then the criminality side of things. But I think there should be grace with individuals that, even if their status says something, look deeper, see the gray areas of each side. But that's all I'll say.
Florida, certainly you might find law enforcement willing to cooperate with federal immigration authorities there.
Community. We're going to talk about his. I'm not a huge follower on some of these things, so I'm not too keen on some of the details around the criminal and civil charges against Trump. The immunity is going to probably touch on those cases.
A landmark decision in American history as it relates to presidential power.
When Trump initially took office, the median vote on the Supreme Court was a moderate conservative, someone who would draw the line somewhere. Then Trump appointed a third of the United States Supreme Court. I'm Ian Millhiser. I cover the Supreme Court.
So, yeah, I think Sotomayor... Isn't there 4 Democrats, though, on the court?
Fox. Trump v. United States is the decision that came down last July concerning Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's indictment of Trump for trying to steal the 2020 presidential election. Trump made this really outlandish argument that he could not be charged with the crime for any official acts he committed while president. Pretty much everyone thought that argument was silly and ridiculous, and there was no chance that the court would ever adopt it. And then all 6 of the Republican justices adopted it. What that decision said, it said that Donald Trump is immune from criminal prosecution for crimes that he commits using the official powers of office. Trump is allowed to give any order he wants to the Department of Justice. The basic matter is just that anything he does can potentially be beyond the scope of the criminal justice process.
I don't have too much to add there. There's a lot of details within that. Within the Supreme Court filings, within the Supreme Court oral arguments, that would be interesting to look at. I was just thinking in my head, like, who are all the Supreme Court justices? And if you want to pause here with me, you want to pause here with me and kind of see what those might look like. I'm going to say, because I've actually kind of been thinking lately more about the Supreme Court, just more on a knowledge basis, and I've been trying to understand like the history of such, and like some of the the big cases that have came across the years, the 200 plus years that we've been here, and specifically some of the cases that have passed recently, whether it be the one overturning Roe versus Wade, whether it be the one where it's Trump versus the United States. So let's look at it real quick. So we had Biden appoint, please, I hope I say this name right, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Biden appointed her in 2022. And then you have the 3 Trump appointees, Amy Coney Barrett in 2020, Brett Kavanaugh in 2018, and Neil Gorsuch in 2017. Of course, Jackson is Democratic leaning, and the 3 I just named, of course, are conservative leaning. And then we have Elena Kagan, appointed by Obama in 2010. Sotomayor, appointed by Obama, another one, in 2009. Then we have Alito, who is 2006. Clarence Thomas, who's 1991 by George W. Bush, and then the Chief Justice John Roberts, 2005. So, as it looks like, I believe Alito, Thomas, and Roberts are all conservative leaning. The three I just mentioned, the newer ones, are conservative leaning, and Sotomayor, Kagan, and Brown are the three Democratic leaners. So it's a heavily favored conservative court, and I'm thinking that Thomas and Alito, Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito, are also on the edge of retiring themselves, which could give Trump a historic 5 appointees. So we'll have to see how it happens, but let's keep going. Gaza, very important topic.
More than 40,000 Palestinians killed since the October 7th Hamas massacre.
Right.
We'll let them talk, but very touchy subject. I don't have a direct stance on Carlos. Like I said, I am ignorant to some of the details, and I'd love for people to educate me if you want me to get a little bit more educated on this topic. I don't want to take a political stance because political stances divide people. Let's think more about the humanity side of things. Overall, war is useless. War is useless. I think there should be quick resolve to this. It's been going on for way too long. So that's why I always think that, there needs to be more done on the UN side in terms of cleaning up the UN to allow for, better resolves to things like this. It's horrible seeing, the numbers of on either side, and you can't make a case for one side without the other. You just can't. Look at it on a humanities standpoint. If you were in the room from 10 people that are, Israelis, and then 10 people who were Palestinians in that room, imagine that it's translating perfectly. Say I speak English, and you can speak English to all 10 of them, and you can understand where they're coming from, understand their stories, their backgrounds, their reasonalities. That's what needs to happen. There needs to be more integrated conversations because we're all people. We're all people. I think each nation has the right to defend themselves, but I think each state, each nation has the right to be the bigger person and to make resolve happen quickly with as little human life suffering as possible. And I say suffering, I don't even say casualties. I say suffering, because it's just, we're better than that. We're better than that. So I have a nonpartisan stance on it for sure. Let's keep going.
Right now, the situation on the ground in Gaza is an extraordinary humanitarian crisis and a moral stain on the United States for enabling so much of this to happen. But it can always get worse. Trump has a blank check approach to Israel. He and his advisors don't believe in any of the even feeble restraints that the Biden administration had put on Israeli conduct. There are factions inside the Israeli government that have different visions of how to conduct the war. The extreme right on Netanyahu's flank, people like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, believe that Trump will let them do what they want based on what he said, what his advisors say, and what his political coalition at home wants.
Are you on board with the way the IDF is taking the fight in Gaza?
You've got to finish the problem.
These people have a maximalist vision of what they want the war to be. Actually seizing and taking Gaza for Israel and returning to settlement, right, to rebuilding Israeli outposts, moving Israeli Jewish citizens in to make sure that its control over the area never slips. That would mean not just temporary eviction of Gazans from their homes and their cities, which would be bad enough. It would mean creating a massive permanent refugee population. Outside of Gaza, in the West Bank, we can only imagine. Previous American position has been you shall not under any circumstances annex parts of the West Bank. It would be Israel declaring, in essence, its willingness to rule over the Palestinians in perpetuity. What I do know for sure is that a Trump administration would do nothing to punish them for it.
Yeah, I can't add anything there. Just take my statement at the beginning. It's more about the humanity of things. We just need to oppose all suffering. Go on. Ellipses.
Okay, let's make this quick. I'm Adam. I produced this video. I think it is fair to say this is a historic moment. And one thing it shows is that we truly do not know what the future.
Yeah, that's one thing. I know I literally just paused again, but regardless of what has been said, we got to think that those are words. Let's listen to the actions. See how the actions portray. Now, words do influence action, but let's look at the actions in the future.
Holds. In these next 4 years, journalism is going to be important. Things will be confusing. It will sometimes be a struggle to know exactly what you should be paying attention to. We would like to be a place that you come to have your biggest questions answered, whether you believe crucial.
Trump declared he would veto a national abortion ban if he's reelected.
Trump winning the presidency is not good for abortion rights. I mean, he's been out there claiming that he's the father of IVF, that he's going to be great for women's rights, but he surrounds himself with lots of people who absolutely, do not have that as their goal. I'm Rachel Cohen. I cover social policy at Vox, and I've been really focused on abortion rights for the last 2.5 years since Roe was overturned. Something that has been confusing for voters is that I don't think we're going to see a federal ban coming out of Congress.
No.
The biggest way that Trump could, I think, use his executive power to restrict abortion rights is to push for the enforcement of the Comstock Act on the federal level. The Comstock Act was this law passed in 1873, and among other things, it banned mailing anything associated with abortion. When the Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide, the Comstock Act was rendered moot. It didn't matter anymore, but Congress never actually repealed it. Now that Roe has been overturned, you have a bunch of conservatives, including J.D. Vance, who are saying now is the time actually to enforce this zombie law that's been on the books for decades that people forgot about, and we should ban anything associated with abortion from being sent in the mail. So that could include not only abortion pills, which are used in the majority of abortions in the US, but it could also mean any medical equipment associated with, surgical abortion, like dilators or speculums. That would effectively mean a nationwide ban on abortion.
I have to look more into that to see the facts, but it's interesting, that act. I did not know too much about that. Now, this is going to talk about Chinese tariffs and winning big in America. That's the whole thesis of this. I guarantee
Some
you.
might say it's economic nationalism. I call it common sense.
The thing about tariffs is that the president has a lot of unilateral authority to impose them without
So authority by himself, so executive authority.
Congress's will. I'm Eric Levitz, and I write about politics and policy. A tariff is basically a tax on an imported good, usually the...
Yeah, so basically, if I had this phone and I was selling this phone to Americans and I was Canadian, I don't think there's going to be Canadian tariffs. But if I was Canadian and I was selling this phone to Americans at $100, now there's going to be $100 minus the the price that is tacked on top of that. It's like a tax, but it's like a premium. You have to put a premium on goods and services that are imported. That makes sense.
Producer passes on the cost of that tax to consumers by charging higher prices to compensate for the tax.
That's exactly what happens. Is you're not just going to... No one wants to lose their margins. I'm a business owner myself. No one wants to lose their margins. So, my little ship right here, my little paperweight ship. So if I'm sailing over the sea and I'm dropping off whatever I'm dropping off, and I'm losing money now because there is now an imposed tariff, well, do I suffer or do I just increase my price? So sometimes tariffs are only as good as how reactionary they are. If people, and this is my personal opinion on it, if people don't move their needle on their price after tariffs are installed, tariffs can be considered a good thing for the United States. But if they do, it just gets more expensive.
Trump's signature proposal on tariffs in the 2024 campaign was a 10% tariff on all foreign imports, regardless of what country they come from.
All foreign? That's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm muted.
Which includes things that the United States cannot possibly produce. There's no tax that you can put on foreign coffee beans that will make it possible to grow them in New England. The general consensus from economists is that this is going to significantly increase prices for Americans, as well as actually potentially undermining American manufacturing. I think that in general, voters tend to be sympathetic to any protectionist trade policy, but I think that in practice,
60% on Chinese imports.
as we've seen in the Biden years, voters are very sensitive to increases in consumer prices. On the other hand, though, this is something that Trump really genuinely seems to believe and hold as a core economic principle, really since the late 1980s.
We let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade.
Put a 25% tax on products that come into the United States.
So that means that Trump plausibly could enact this tariff even if a majority of Republicans in Congress do not want him to.
Interesting conversation economically right there. Government.
It's time to put the divisions of the past 4 years behind us. It's time to unite. And we're going to try. We have to try.
In any democratic system of government, you need nonpartisan civil servants whose job it is to follow and implement the law. A lot of that stuff is technical, from National Parks Administration to the way the Defense Department is run, to the way that we protect and store our nuclear weapons. Trump doesn't like this. Neutral rules of governance obstruct his ability to govern like a kind of machine politician who uses government as a tool of rewarding his friends and punishing his enemies. That's why he hates what he calls the deep state.
Demolish the deep state. Obliterate the deep state. Dismantle the deep state.
We could be in a world where very swiftly, because there are no legislative guardrails against this, what if the IRS is now a fully political agency and audits start coming in along political lines? Businesses or media organizations that are critical of Trump start being harassed using the tax code as a means of punishing them. Think about everything that you rely on government to do. And now imagine those tasks being bent towards political ends. Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States again. And this time around, we'll make the first time look like child's play.
Okay, I don't appreciate the fear-mongering, because fear-mongering is based off of hypotheticals right there. I think we should prepare for any possibility, but we should not constitute what is going to happen. Yeah, there's, like we said in the beginning, or like they said in the beginning, there's tons of things that he did not implement that he promised, right? So, you can't take words for actions. Like I said before, you have to take actions for actions. And there are guardrails for some of these things that he mentioned. I know they are. There are guardrails for not, be able to just, you're not just going to be able to politically go after businesses without particularly lots of lawsuits that can be combated. Now, that is a hassle of itself, and that's not very popular to do that. So I don't think he would do that. Same way he did not prosecute Hillary Clinton. It's not a popular thing to do. So, and that's one thing about Trump. He's more of a populist type of guy. So he's not too radical, and that's an insane thing for people to hear. But he's not too radical. If you look at the things that he's implemented, like, he might win the popular vote for this time around in 2024. Populist. So I don't think he's going to do anything that could damn that. So that's the video, guys. I know it was an interesting one, more modern than usual, but I mean, it was an interesting election. We started about 2023, about, March, April 2023, and here we are in November 2024, and 2 more months of the Biden administration, and then we're in our 47th presidency of the United States of America. Should be interesting times. We'll see how the history books look back at it. But if you, if you're with me and you're all for humanity, you like listening to videos that are around history and things like that, I imply you to hit the subscribe button, and let's react to some more videos in the future. If you have any videos you want me to react to, drop them below, inbox me, whatever you got to do. But until next time, peace out. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.